Hi, I'm Xander, and this is my first video. I've been wanting to do something of this style for a while, and very nervous, very excited. This is where I'm going to talk about things that are important to me, and you clicked on this, so you care at least a little bit about what I'm going to be discussing today, which is, obviously, the Magnus Archives. Particularly to, this thing. This is a thing that listen to that crisp. This is just a notebook that is essentially my mega notes, my lore bible for the Magnus Archives podcast. I posted a few videos about it on my TikTok. And the response was very shocking. I didn't expect so many people to care or see it even, let alone think it was cool enough to ask what my process was. At one point I even asked in the comments, would anybody care if I made a long form YouTube video about this? And a few people said, yes, like, and I've been stalling making this because I don't really know how to explain what my process is. For me, it just felt very similar to taking notes in class. So something happens, something is said, I will write it down. Important things get bigger highlights, things that, pieces of lore that connect to other pieces of lore get, drop-down notes that connect to each other, so on and so forth. I also have this one. Maybe I will talk about this one as well, at some point. Since at the moment of recording this, the Magnus Protocol is on a break until next year, I figured this was as good a time as any to actually throw this together. You might be looking at some of these clips and wondering why I did that to myself. I don't know. Because the Magnus Archives is so lore heavy, there's some joke of like, the scariest thing in the Magnus Archives is realizing you should have been keeping track of names this whole time. And I think I saw that meme right before I started listening to it, so I took that as like, oh, I see. So, okay, I have to lock in. So that's what I did, and now I'm going to share it with you, in a way, while telling you a little bit about the Magnus Archives. What it is, what it's about, what goes on. This is not going to be a spoiler-free video, but we're going to go episode by episode, and I think maybe in this one, we might be lucky if we get to episode 10. Also, quick note before I really get into this. I am a simple person. If you see any mistakes, yeah, probably. There's probably a few errors. I know for sure I wrote in pen a couple of times and I misunderstood something, and there are a few words crossed out. This originally was just for me, okay? I don't have a proofreader. This is just a thing that I put together, and I am one guy, so if you see a mistake, you can laugh at me in the comments, but please give me credence and patience. So yeah, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for caring about this. I really appreciate it. So first, before anything else, what is the Magnus Archives? The Magnus Archives is an audio fiction podcast that ran from 2016 to 2021. It is an epistolary series made by British people. Each episode contains a statement, which is essentially a story of an obscure occurrence that is typically unexplainable and has been sent to an institution in London, England, that is specifically centered around the paranormal, the esoteric, the weird stuff, The statements are like reports that are given just by everyday people in the public, essentially for the school to research, to have on hand for references for any of the students. And a lot of these stories are relatively traumatic sometimes, and a lot of these people that are giving the statements assume that this process might be therapeutic or cathartic in some way for them. It's usually not true, but we are following
Jonathan Sims, head archivist of the Magnus Institute.
He is in charge of filing the different statements into the proper places. It's an archiving job, He's new, and he's already over it. The state of this place, okay? Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. I want to mention first and foremost, I'm going to put, potential content warnings on screen. It's kind of back and forth for every episode. There are content warnings available. I think it's on the GitHub for the site where all the transcripts are. I recommend looking into them because they're much more detailed about the content warnings than I'm going to be. I'm going to kind of be showing you throughout my book, my book. There are totally spoilers if you look hard enough, okay? Maybe don't if you're if you don't want that. This is my guideline notebook, so there will be pieces connected. Don't look at those if you don't wanna. So we've met John, right? Posh-sounding head archivist of this spooky institute, recently hired into this position. And the previous head archivist, an old lady that is named Gertrude Robinson, she apparently sucked at her job, according to John, because everything is a mess. The state of the archives is horrid. And he spends a little bit just complaining that she obviously wasn't a good archivist, and now he has just so much work to do. He mentions that he has 3 staff members that work with him in the archive that will be assisting him in research and filing stuff and understanding everything. Their names are Tim, Sasha, and Martin. It's abundantly clear very early on that John is not a super big fan of Martin.
Shut up, Martin.
We will hear from all 3 of them eventually, but for the first little bit, it's just John talking. And how do we hear John talking? You know, I mentioned it's an epistolary series, so how is it an epistolary series? He is attempting to record digital versions of every statement and back it up on his laptop. And that would make filing everything much easier if he can do it in a digital format. However, there's an issue. Some of these statements, these ghost stories given by the public, they don't record on his laptop. It sounds like static and nothingness, and he's like, that's not right. So after a little bit of brainstorming, they decide to try out some old tape recorders that were found in, I think it was artifact storage, and these work fine. So the entire podcast has this kind of grainy type tape recorder noise, you know? We are hearing what is on the tape recorders the entire series. That's what the Magnus Archives is. I'm going to attempt to finish walking you through episode 1 and explain the statement, and most episodes, at least in the beginning, begin with John just straight up recording the statement, just reading the text from the statement. And then afterwards, he gives either an update about, you know, archival life, or he explains, you know, more about the statement, what he and his team found when they were researching, and sometimes he puts in his general opinion. So, what happens in the first statement? Beforehand, we are immediately introduced to the person giving the statement and the date in which it takes place, if that's available knowledge. In this case, the statement giver is a man named Nathan Watts, and it took place in 2012. And he was out partying with his friends when he got a little too inebriated. I think he said he threw up outside, and then he decides, you know, I'm going home. I can't drive. I'm gonna stumble my way home. So as he's drunkenly making his way back to his apartment, he hears a noise. He hears somebody ask,
"Can I have a cigarette?"
for a cigarette. The voice was very distant, and at first Nathan couldn't figure out who it was coming from. There didn't look like there was anybody around him. But eventually, he noticed a figure standing across the street in a very narrow alleyway. The figure looked like they were kind of swaying a little, so Nathan assumed that they were probably also drunk. Their face was gaunt, and they didn't really look well. Looking at them made Nathan very uneasy, and in that moment, he was reminded of the anglerfish that lures its prey closer while concealing the rest of itself in the darkness. The stranger asks again, "Can I have a cigarette?" And this time Nathan notices their mouth isn't moving, and worse, doesn't even look like their legs are touching the ground. Nathan's like, "Hold on, let me get my flash." And he points his phone's flash down, all the way down there, and the thing like contorts into itself and then kind of disappears into the darkness of the alleyway. So he leaves. Finally, you'll begin to learn that a lot of the time with these statements, the reason that the person has so much to say is that they didn't leave when they first noticed something weird. That's like an ongoing theme. So he leaves, likely deals with a hangover the next morning, whatever. that doesn't leave him. That's not just a thing that leaves a person. So Nathan's like, maybe I was just really drunk. I'm gonna go back to that area and check things out. Obviously, during the daytime the next day, the thing is not there. There's no signs of, like, anything suspicious except a single unsmoked cigarette. I think specifically a Marlboro Red cigarette. That's right. It was red. It was a red one. So Nathan leaves. He sees on the news that another university student, John Fellows is his name, has gone missing and was last seen around that same area. And in the photo for John Fellows' missing persons report, you can see in his pocket a whole pack of red Marlboro cigarettes. Marlboro Red cigarettes. That's what they're called. The red ones! So, how about that? The statement comes to an end.
Statement ends.
And now we get the post-statement discussion from our head archivist here. Immediately, he's just like, that wasn't that. There's a perfectly reasonable explanation for that. Plus, he was drunk. He was drunk. He was drunk. That's not wrong. Sasha, remember, archival staff member Sasha, she found a good amount of missing persons reports from that exact area over the course of a couple of years. Well, a couple as in 2005 to 2010. I have the list here. It's gonna appear on screen. Are these names important later on? Who knows? Maybe, maybe. 3 people that went missing around here have been confirmed smokers. Which could be nothing. There's not that much other information that the Institute has on this, aside from a single photo that was texted from one of the missing people before, like the night she went missing, to her sister, that said, check out this drunk, creepy guy.
LOL.
From the same alleyway. When Sasha turned up the brightness, you could see like a hand, like a spooky Slenderman hand in there. So, also, I don't know if it's still there, but cool fun fact, I saw going around the internet that a lot of the things, not all the things, but certain things and places in the Magnus Archives are real, and like you can go to them and stuff. This took place at Old Fish Market Close. That's fun. I love that. Not to say everything in this podcast with the most American voice possible. I'm very sorry. I saw a picture going around the internet for a little bit. I don't know if it's still there, but someone apparently visited the spot, for the reference, for the joke, and someone else had put some art of an anglerfish there. I'm not saying vandalization is good. Don't do that. But I just thought that was kind of cool. I thought that was kind of cute, Hey. So that's the first statement, and that's all the information we get. And again, John is skeptical. He's like, he was drunk. He was drunk. He doesn't deny the obvious, missing people that were reported from there. He assumes that Nathan just saw, like, a homeless person, maybe an addict or someone that was just going through it, and in his drunken haze assumed that they were all spooky. That's kind of the formatting for a lot of season 1. So that took entirely too long if I'm going to eventually go through every single episode. I'm going to attempt to hit every important part of the next episode faster this time. Episode 2 also begins right out of the gate with another statement reading. Joshua Gillespie just graduated university and was in Amsterdam celebrating doing all kinds of substances, all kinds. There, in a cafe, he was approached by a man calling himself John, not to be confused with Jonathan Sims or John Fellows. It's a common name. This John guy said he was also English and, a foreigner in Amsterdam, but Joshua noticed he did not have that sort of accent. So that's weird, that's strange. And this guy was strange. He asked Joshua, hey, I need a buddy to take a bunch of money from me in exchange for holding on to a package for me. Yeah, why not? No, it's not true. He's hesitant until he hears how much money he's going to get, which is a lot of money. And then he's like, yeah, okay. So he agrees. John leaves. Joshua continues his Amsterdam trip, and everything is fine. A year goes by, and he's been very hesitant to actually spend the money that he was sent, because this whole thing is weird. And he also never got a package, so what's happening, you know? A year goes by, and Joshua decides, I'm going to move, and I'm going to use this money to get a decent apartment. So he does, moves to a different city, rents a nice apartment. The guy, the John guy, he shouldn't have this address. There's no way he should have this address. But right after he moves in, he is delivered the package. It comes brought to him by these two big dudes, these two burly delivery men. I always pictured these guys, you know, and they have a box. Guess what's in the box? Take a guess. It's a coffin. It's a big, big, spooky wooden coffin with chains around it. Engraved into it, like scratched, are the words, "Do not open." There is no return address, and the weird delivery guys leave. They go. Joshua's got this coffin in his new fancy apartment, and he's like, okay, so I'm not gonna open that. You know, pretty clearly says not to do that. So, he's not gonna open it. And he can't tell if there's somebody in there, but he can't smell anything, which you would assume if there was, you would smell something. He doesn't know what to do with it, so... Coffin in the living room. Coffin in the living room. It just becomes a part of his living room. He actually stops using his living room quite a bit because there's a coffin in there, man. He doesn't want to be in there. He notices that when it rains, it makes noises. Like there's a thing making like ghostly moaning sounds in there when it rains. Not exactly thrilled about that, but you know, what can he do about it right now? He kind of just gets used to it, believe it or not. He gets used to this coffin in his living room until he sets, he kind of treats it like a coffee table, and he sets a cup on it, and it reacts. He hears like noises in there, I think like scratching and stuff. Cool. So other than that, after that experience, Joshua begins having really crazy nightmares, and he did not used to sleepwalk, but he is now. He keeps waking up closer and closer to the coffin, and sometimes he has the key in his hand, like like something's trying to make him unlock the coffin and open it. This gets so bad that one night he wakes up in the middle of the night to himself at the coffin with the key like in the keyhole, and he decides enough is enough, and he does the credit card trick. If you've ever seen like people on TV who have like I think it's like a shopping addiction, they would freeze their credit cards in big blocks, so when the urge happens, they have to like they are physically unable to do it. He does that with the key, and usually touching the ice when that happens will wake him up, so he can't do it. And if you would believe it, he just gets used to this. Finally, about a year after the coffin was delivered, he hears a knock at the door. And once again, the two dudes are there, the two delivery men, along with John from Amsterdam, you know, Mr. John. And he seems very shocked to see Joshua in one piece at the door, greeting him. He lets them in, he opens the freezer, takes the block out, doesn't even care about thawing it, and is just like, here you go, here's the key in the block. While the delivery men are preparing to, you know, take the box, take the coffin, put the coffin back in the box, and then take it off of his hands again, while he's like outside letting them get it, he doesn't want anything to do with the coffin. He doesn't want to see them put it away, he doesn't want to see them put it in the box and take it out. He's just like, while he's outside, he hears what he thinks to be a scream, and only the two delivery men emerge from his apartment with, you know, the box. He notices the van says Breakin' and Hope Deliveries, and they get in the van and they leave. Remember that. Don't forget that. And that's the statement. I know I just said in the first one that a lot of these people only get to where they are to like need to give a statement because they just, you know, they F around and find out. Joshua survived because he decided, I'm not going to engage. This is not for me. I'm not going to do it. Most people throughout the series don't have that, you know, sense of self-preservation. So that's the end of the statement, and we hear again from John a little bit about what was discovered during the researching aspect of this. Another staff member at the archives, Tim, he researched the Breakin' and Hope delivery service and found it is based in Nottingham, hasn't been in operation since 2008? 2009? Non-operational since 2009. They do know that the apartment that Josh lived in, nobody else lived lived in it, and eventually he moved out of that, by the way. After he moved out, nobody else lived in it, and eventually the building was just demolished. That's all we get. John does mention that he grew up there. That's cute to know. But aside from that, John also points out that he was on a lot of drugs, like self-admittedly doing a lot of them. So what do you think he deduces from that? He doesn't believe anything weird happened. He's just like, okay. So yeah, that's episode 2. How about episode 3, huh? So every few episodes, I would love to give a little bit of, detail for what I found important and what I took in my notes, aside from just like the general summary, the things that I took note of. There's just not a whole lot of things to connect quite yet. But trust me, that will be a feature of this series, don't worry. In 2005, a university student named Amy Patel met another student, Graham Folger. I'm gonna be saying Folger, I think that's what it said. He seemed older than her. She assumed like 10 years. And he was also a smoker. Uh-oh. Yeah, Graham was a weirdo. He spent a lot of time in class just scribbling in his notebook, filling them. Would fill his notebooks even when the lecturer wasn't actively speaking, and there shouldn't have been anything for him to be writing down. Sometimes, though, she would ask him for notes, like, hey, can I see your notes from class yesterday? Graham said he didn't take any notes. Odd. Quite strange. One day, on the way home from class, they found themselves on the same bus, and they get off at the same stop. During the walk home, Amy falls and hurts her head. She likely has a concussion. And Graham's like, whoa, are you okay? Let's, you can come back to my apartment and I'll make sure you're okay. She's like, okay. And on the way back, she discovers that they, live across from each other. She's like, oh, I see. Okay, cool. So his apartment's weird, okay? Weird apartment for a weird guy. It's full of big shelves of books, of other notebooks that he's just filled. So Amy feels awful. As I said, she fell and hurt her head real bad, and she has a concussion, and she's in this weird guy's weird apartment. So she's just kind of, taking in the room, and she really gets hung up on this table that he has. It's a wooden table, and it's got these weird patterns that meet in the middle, and in the middle there is an odd square hole. Weird antique thing, weird antique for a weird guy in his weird house. Amy didn't like it. It made her feel weird to look at. She didn't like it. She really was not having a good time. She said that his pipes were too loud. She was overwhelmed. Everything was just, you ever had a concussion? Yeah. As time goes on, she is morbidly interested in this weird guy with his weird habits and his weird house. And she lives across the street from him, so she can just peek and watch, and she does. She calls it Graham watching. She's just watching this guy. And he's weird. Always writing in his notebooks and ripping it out and frantically writing in it, and he can't be writing cohesive words. He can't know what he's writing. Amy even swears she saw him eat the contents of a notebook when he was finished filling it with his frantic scribbles. He seems paranoid. He's always, He's freaking out. He's a weird guy. One night in 2006, she's watching him, like a weirdo. Graham's weird. I keep saying Graham's weird, but it's not normal to watch your neighbor, no matter how weird they are. But, she's doing it this one night in 2006, and his light was on, but she couldn't actually see him. Amy noticed the pipes, the pipes that were, really loud and overwhelming. She thought she was looking at the pipes. It moved. It looks like it's a collection of limbs that are contorting and bending and moving across his wall, which isn't typically what pipes do. And then the lights go out, and Amy's just kind of there, oh, all right. She calls authorities. She calls the police, anonymously, and she watches through her window while the police show up. Graham answers, but it's not him. It's not Graham. It doesn't look at all like the guy that she knows, that lives there, that she's met, that is in the same school as her. It's not him. Different hair, different face, different height, everything is not him. Police are talking to him, and he's, like, being cordial, like, obviously, you know, acting confused why the police were called. They come in to do, like, a check around and everything. Nothing seems weird. Amy notices what looks like a passport on the ground in his room, and the officer picks it up and looks at it. She assumes, like, obviously, well, this is going to show the officer that, you know, Graham Folger is not the guy who is currently speaking to them. That's not the case, and the officer kind of compares them, and it seems to be a match. Nothing seems amiss to that officer, so they leave, and Amy is just like, what? You know, what's going on? As she's watching, this new person, this not Graham, looks at her through the window and, like, smiles and closes it like a villain in a movie. He also begins to throw out the notebooks that Graham had, like, just progressively getting rid of all of them. Redecorates the entire apartment, and of course Amy knows this because she's still watching. What's up, Amy? I mean, like, I know this is weird at this point. This is weird. You want to know, but, like... Later, as Amy's going to work, this not Graham catches up with her and is just like, Amy! It was so nice for you to come over. At some point, I should return the visit, don't you think? And this is obviously not the guy that she visited with. This is not Graham. That makes her super sketched out, and she is really uncomfortable now. So, she straight up moves. She leaves. She packs her shit, and she moves. Evidently, it's not fun to watch this guy anymore after he says something like that to her. So yeah, that's the statement in Across the Street from Amy Patel. And later we hear Tim, you remember Tim, he, while doing research, finds every photo that comes up for Graham Folger looks like the description that Amy gave of the not Graham, of the replacement. Except, in particular, 80s Polaroids. Those seem to depict the old Graham, the original depiction of Graham that she gave in her statement, which I did not read, but it is part of it. She was contacted, but had absolutely no interest in talking about it. The notebooks were found, and every single one of them said 2 words over and over again. Keep watching. So that's cool. John doesn't give us too much of his opinion for this one, but you can assume that he's still skeptical about it, but he's almost like, he can't deny the weird part of it, the weird photo thing, you know? So, we're getting somewhere. Episode 4 is where I think lore starts getting pretty heavy. So, are you guys ready? I'm ready. I love talking about the show. Dominic Swain is a theater tech, mainly working in the lighting department. One night in 2012, he was passing time before going to see a friend of his in a different show that he wasn't working on, when he went into a charity shop, like a thrift store type thing. He was looking around and he found a book, a leather-bound book that looked very, very old, and in his opinion, probably expensive and important, with the title Ex Altiora on it. It was Latin, and it means from higher, or from the heights. It had graphics of a big open sky, with the text on the inner cover reading, From the Library of Jurgen Leitner. Dominic thought this was pretty cool, and likely, again, probably expensive, and the shop wasn't selling it for that much, so he figured, you know, why not? I'll make some money, and he bought it for cheap, and then went to go see the show. He said his friend did amazingly, as he expected. The entire time it smelled like ozone, oddly, but he knew a decent amount about it, but he couldn't pinpoint exactly where, you know, what the source was. So after the show, he asks his friend, you know, you want to look at the book? And she's like, sure, you know, why not? She checks it out, but she doesn't really want to look at it for too long because she said looking at it triggers her vertigo for some reason. Later, Dominic looks up this Leitner guy. There was an eBay listing for a copy of The Key of Solomon, but it had already been sold to somebody named G.R. Bookworm 1818, so that wasn't Dominic. Whoever bought it for a lot of money. And this book apparently was also from the library of this Jurgen Leitner guy. He looked up Leitner and he found some stuff. He didn't find a lot about his book, but he found some stuff about Leitner. Apparently some guy in the 90s that was a very popular book collector, specifically focusing on, you know, weird stuff, weird esoteric, weird books. Take a shot every time I say esoteric throughout this series. There were a lot of mixed opinions about Jurgen Leitner online, and a couple sources mentioned that he was affiliated with the store called Pinhole Books. So he goes to Pinhole Books and is met by this older woman with a shaved head and a bunch of weird, like, scripture and text tattooed all over her, like, everywhere. Hey. Okay. So we find out later, this is a woman named Mary Key, and she owns Pinhole Books. When she sees his copy of Ex Altiora, she is, like, really focused. She's really interested. She's like, come in, come in. Her house is full of books, full of shelves, full of books, some of which look very old. So Mary's checking out his book, and she mentions to Dominic that it's been a while since she's had a book from the Lightner library. But her Gerard, and we need to have a moment for a second, okay? We need to talk about something. Okay, with so much peace and love. For some reason, the guy who plays Jonathan Sims, Johnny Sims, the writer, like one of the writers, he's like one half of Mr. Magnus Archives. Yeah, his name is Jonathan Sims. Fandom calls him Johnny Sims to separate John and Johnny. For some reason, he says Gerard like Jared throughout the entire series. A lot of people have talked about it. There's not, it's just a boo-boo, I'm pretty sure. It's just a mistake. Many other characters do say his name as Gerard. It's spelled Gerard. It's only John that says Gerard like this, and as he's reading the statements to us, it is pronounced like Jared. Get that out of the way. So Mary says her Gerard, her son, is always looking for Lightners for her. She's like, do you want to see my Lightner? And he's like, okay. And she produces another leather book, another old leather book. This one, when she moves it, little animal bones gather and fall away from it. Like, I had a very hard time visualizing this at first. Like, they just, like, manifest and fall where it is lifted around, I think. So that's very weird. And Dominic's like, that's really weird. Well, it gets even weirder. Okay. Dominic looks back at his book, and instead of the open sky imagery that was there before, it's now like a lightning storm type thing with a Lichtenberg figure, which looks like this, if you're not familiar. Pretty cool. But that wasn't there before. And Dominic is particularly peeved out by this. He doesn't like it because when he was young, he had a friend named Michael Crew, and he kind of guilted Michael into going out in the storm with him one night, and Michael was super duper struck by lightning. He survived, but he had that kind of Lichtenberg thing all over him. If you've ever looked up, I don't think I'm gonna put pictures here, but if you've ever seen what it looks like when someone's actually struck by lightning, it's very strange. It's very funky. So he is uncomfortable by this. Hello. It is a different day. My camera battery died. Oh yeah, and he still smells ozone. Like the weird ozone smell. That's still there. That's like following him around. Dominic, like, remembering all of that and feeling awful, as you know he probably would. He's like, oh yeah, and the fact that the book changed, you know, that's weird. He's like, oh, I don't like this, and he leaves. While Dominic is in, like, walking around Keyhole Books, when she takes him into, like, the other room, he describes seeing a bunch of really detailed paintings. Mary says that her Gerard made these. Gerard is a painter, how cool. He gets out of there. So he's home, and then that night, someone's at his door, and it's Gerard Key. He is described as looking very out of it, very tired, like that kind of scruffy look of someone that hasn't shaved in a while, like me. My favorite aspect of Gerard's depiction that they mention throughout the series is his badly dyed black hair. Gerard is goth. He's a goth king. So Gerard's at the door, and he offers him, I think, 5,000 pounds is about $6,000? 5,000 pounds is $6,704. So that's how much Gerard offers him for the book at his doorstep in the middle of the night. So that's a lot of money. And Dominic's like, okay, yeah, I'll do that, sure. Remember, he bought this from an antique store, assuming it was probably worth something by how it looked, and he bought it for very little money. So Gerard's like, okay, I'm gonna go pull out the money, I'll be right back, and leaves to go do that. Dominic's like, okay, I'll wait here, I guess. What else am I gonna do? And in this moment, he's like, this family is weird. I know the name of his mother. I know Mary Key, and I know she owns Pinhole Books. So I'm going to look them up and maybe see if there's like a criminal record or anything with these people, because they're very odd. And wouldn't you know it, he finds something, all right. Mary Key has not been with us since 2008. It was determined to be an OD of some kind. Strange part is that the authorities ruled that it couldn't have been just done by her, because she was mutilated, just torn apart, and pieces of her skin were found hanging from fishing wire. There's not a really delicate way to describe this. They thought her son Gerard did it, but all of the evidence that they had, none of it was usable, so he wasn't actually arrested for it. The photo that came with this article was very clearly Mary Key. It was the same woman, but she had long hair, or at least hair, and no tattoos. But like, you can clearly tell when it's still the same person, even, when they have changes done. Like, he knew that that was the same woman. So Dominic's like reading this, and he's just like, oh, that is a whole lot. Okay, there's a lot to unpack here. And then Gerard's at the door, and he's like, I got the money! Dominic still wants 5,000 pounds, so he's like, here you go, take it. Gerard gives him the cash, and then takes the book, and just burns it. Just right immediately there, burns it. Burns Ex Altiora immediately, like in front of Dominic. He's like, I thought your mom was like collecting those, right? I thought that was the whole deal. And he says, my mom does not always know what is the best for our family. And leaves. Oh yeah, he picks up the burnt book carcass from the thing, and the dude's like, hey dude, that's dangerous, why are you doing that with your hands? And Gerard says, don't worry, I've had worse. And we will get to that. That's Dominic's story with Ex Altiora, the book from the library of Jürgen Leitner that he no longer has. After the statement's done, John's just like, a Leitner. He's like, I know what that is. He talks about how he hasn't really heard much about Leitner in a while. He was notorious for collecting paranormal books, weird books, books on demonology, and the Institute knows a little bit about him. Obviously, the archival staff did some research on this statement. Gerard can't be found anywhere. There's gonna be at least one clip where I say Jared. Also, Pinhole Books obviously closed in 2008 for obvious reasons. Oh, and Tim, archival staff member Tim, he found out that the majority of the writings of the lettering that was on Mary Key's tattoos was apparently Sanskrit. And I think they know this from the crime scene photos of the skin being disconnected from Mary Key. So that likely implies that while the photo of her in her life that was used for the article had hair and no tattoos, in her time of death, she had, that was then when she had the tattoos. So, we're learning. If you're like, what's going on, what's with that, who is this weird lady, we'll get to that, don't worry, everything will be explained, connecting the dots. So, that was a whole lot, and we've been talking about this for a bit, so I think that it's time for an intermission. No, I'm not sponsored, but guess what I do have? Hi, buddy. Yes, he is. Finn wants to thank everybody for being here. Yeah. Genuinely, though, thank you for being here. This is, it's crazy. It's after Page Turner. Ooh, the trash one. Kieran Woodward, I believe it's Kieran, works as a garbage man with 3 other guys, Matthew, David, and Alan. Right out the gate, before we actually get into a lot of storytelling, Kieran kind of just tells us that the city garbage people know a little bit more about you than you think that they do, simply out of what you throw away. Whether this is true in real life, I don't know. But that's you can kind of assume. He also said they are judging you, by the way. Kieran said one day they were doing a pickup and the bag was ripped, and inside there were a bunch of baby doll heads, like the heads of toy dolls. And he's like, well, okay. This was found on 93 Lancaster Road. It's pretty weird. One would say that probably. That does not really give them a whole lot about what type of person lives there, but they know that it's very, very odd. As this goes on, the other garbage workers are like, this is really strange. I want to know what's going on. So they get really morbidly curious. At one point, a while later, they find at the same address, the same house, 93 Lancaster Road, there's a bag of just papers with one of them recognizes is the Lord's Prayer in Latin scroll all around him, just like a whole garbage bag of this. And they're just like cutting open these bags now just to look. I don't know if that's legal. I don't know. A while later, they find another bag full of teeth, just various states of decay, teeth. And they look kind of people-ish, so they're like, ooh. I think this is the time where we contact the authorities, and they call the police. The police get there, they knock on the door of 93 Lancaster Road, and meet an elderly couple who have absolutely no idea what's going on. They're not responsible for the bags, and they are a little bit uncomfortable and frightened now that they know about it. So Kieran's coworker, I mentioned he has a couple of coworkers, one of them, Alan, is kind of losing his mind over this. He's like, he doesn't know what's going on. And he admits that he's been kind of secretly going there, like to 93 Lancaster Road in the middle of the night, just in hopes of seeing whoever is throwing these mystery bags with weird stuff in them, who's throwing them out, because they trust that it's not the old couple. Kieran even was like, man, I've thought about that, you know? I need to know too, what's going on. But Alan really doesn't seem well. He seems like he's not sleeping. This is like taking up a lot of his time. This is confirmed, more or less, when Alan later is fired from his job because he fell asleep at the wheel while driving a company truck and crashed it, obviously. It's clear that he doesn't give up, that this is still taking over a lot of Alan's kind of subconscious. A while later, Kieran gets a text from him, like with no other context, just found him. Kieran can assume what he means, so he's like, that's really not a good sign. I'm gonna go check out 93 Lancaster Road. So this is the strange part. There is a green bag. There's a bag there. It's green. And Kieran opens it, and inside is an anatomically correct copper heart, like a human copper heart, with Alan's name engraved on it. I think he mentioned that it was like cold, like it was like in the freezer or something. After that, he never saw Alan again and never saw any other bags left at that specific address. And the statement comes to an end there with no further information about 93 Lancaster Road, the elderly couple, or Alan. And John's just like, okay, we don't have a lot here. We could not find a lot. They did find, however, that every tooth, because they called the police after the teeth thing, so there's some sort of forensic evidence of this being real and having happened. The teeth were tested, and they all seem to be like the same tooth, like in the same type of tooth, if I understand, from thousands of people, and they were all kind of decaying, they were all rotting. If you thought that was gross, you're in for a fun bit, because the next episode is notoriously, during people's first listen through, this one, episode 6, is a lot of people's first episode that makes them go, ugh. So, let's get into it. Let's get into the Worm 6 episode. Statement comes from a guy named Timothy Hodge, who is, at the beginning of the story, at a bar, drunk, which is notoriously not a good sign for John's credibility after the statement, but he's drunk at this bar, and he sees, like, across the way, a very pretty, very mousy looking girl who seems like a little nervous. I think he described her to look kind of like indie. They lock eyes, they dance with each other. The whole time she's like looking at the door, kind of being like really nervous, and this kind of makes him think that she might be hiding from somebody. Maybe there was a guy that was giving her trouble. At one point, she propositions him, and he's like, okay. So they're dancing, and he does mention that her dancing doesn't really look like boogie dancing. He kind of describes her body as moving very fluidly. He was very transfixed by her, and the word writhing came to his mind. So they start going to his apartment. She's still very paranoid. She's still very nervous. She's still looking around herself. She's kind of like itching herself a little bit. She just seems like a very, very anxious person that's going through it. So when they get back to his place, he's just like, do you need anything? You'd like to talk about it? Maybe. I think she asks for some water, and then she's like, yeah, I'll tell you what's going on. I was walking home a while ago, and I saw a woman. Okay. If you've ever seen Zombieland, and you know the interaction between, like, 408, I think was what he called her apartment number, and Columbus, the main guy from Zombieland, she's like, please, 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 I need in, help me. And he's like, she's so hot, I'm gonna let her in, what's going on? And she's like, this guy who's probably like homeless or something, he attacked me and he tried to bite me. And he was like, that's crazy horrifying. Do you want to stay here? You're really hot. And I can't remember if she flirts with him back or something, but then she had an interaction with a zombie. So if you are getting Zombieland imagery, that's exactly what I got, and it's not a bad comparison. So she explains that she saw a woman on the ground in a red dress, like face down on the ground, and she didn't look well. So this woman Harriet, she comes over to check on her, and the lady, like, she's not well. Harriet, she comes over to check on her, and she sees what looks like something moving from underneath her fancy little red dress, and she's like, that's not normal. Lady, are you okay? She attacks Harriet, this woman does, and Harriet says she feels like she got stabbed, but when she went to the hospital, there was nothing wrong, and she went to report it to the police, but every time she kept getting close to it, she just got so nauseous that she would throw up. Timothy's like, damn, that's crazy. He's being supportive, and he's like, that's so scary. And you wouldn't think this would be the moment where they hook up, but it is. Totally is. So while they're holding each other afterwards and they're just they're laying in bed together, Timothy thinks he sees or feels something move under Harriet's skin. She's like making a lot of noises, like she's like groaning, like she's in pain, and he's just like, do you need something? I've got some medication. I'm gonna go get you something. So he leaves the bedroom, leaves her there, can kind of still hear her making various pained noises while he's getting what he needs, and then he stops right before he's about to come back into the room. He stops because he hears something. Her noises stop. Instead, this is super gross. Instead, he hears a wet noise, and it's described as like an egg hitting a hard floor, like a crack. So he kind of peeks inside, and there is the remains of Harriet with her clothes on the floor, and her kind of skin, for the most part, is on the floor, and atop her is a thin layer of worms. There are layers of worms on like the bed and the wall and everywhere. So he, still mostly clothless, leaves, and here, while he's giving a statement, he's like, yeah, I'm admitting to a crime. Ooh, what are you gonna do? He lit his apartment on fire and left in the middle of the night, nude or mostly nude. I don't know if he ever specifies. He just says he doesn't get dressed. So he's possibly wiener out, like, in the cold streets of England. And not like a horrible overreaction to this. I feel like I'm judging him for this. I'm not meaning to. That's you know, that's horrible. That's horrendous. So he's just like, yeah, I did that. You know, Sasha, remember Sasha? She did some research into this case. According to the report that she found, there were no human remains found inside of Timothy's apartment. There was organic matter that looked like it was charred, but it wasn't tested. It was tested and it wasn't confirmed to be human. They don't know what it is, but it's not a person. Who did he hook up with? Who was that? Harriet Lee, the woman that he described, she was reported at, she is a missing person, though. So, it's likely still connected to her, even if it wasn't exactly her, per se. And the area, I think they mentioned exactly it is, like, what the street is. It is Elthorne Road in Archway. Here's where that is. John's like, that's super familiar, because I remember hearing that that's the last known, like, sighting area of another missing woman named Jane Prentice. How odd. How odd. So, that's the worms episode. Do you like worms? We're almost done with the 10 episodes that I've allotted for this first part. But I'm on 7 of 200, so let's see. Episode 7 does have a lot of mention of war. So, especially given the climate right now, it's a different war. It's a World War I, I believe. Still, if given the climate, if that's something that you're not prepared for, I get it. Look for the next transition graphic. I might put a timestamp if I can figure it out. Yeah. Clarence Berry was a staff sergeant in World War I, referred to as the Great War. He got the nickname Lucky because he managed to go from the start to the finish of the war without getting any, like, severe injuries. He has, like, cuts and burns and stuff, but that's typically not the worst of it. So, he was in France in 1916. He was assigned to assist a second lieutenant named Wilfred Owens. No, Wilfred Owen. Just Owen. No S. They didn't really get along with each other at first, but eventually they became kind of buddies. Wilfred enjoyed writing poetry, specifically usually about the war, and honestly, Clarence did not like it much. He thought that it was kind of pretentious and just not that good. He couldn't argue with the fact that obviously Wilfred had some form of passion, because while he's writing it, it seems like he's almost like really focused, like he hears like a melody in his head while he's writing it. So they are assigned for war. During the attack, Clarence got himself caught on some barbed wire and looked to Wilfred, who was just kind of standing there like swaying as if he saw or heard something in the distance. There was a shot and Wilfred fell. Clarence survived. Wilfred was found sometime later in a crater with a body of another person who was not still there. Was later identified as a man named Joseph Rayner. Clarence visits Wilfred in the medical area, and it's clear that he is not well, but Wilfred's really not okay. So he describes the worst case of shell shock he has ever seen, and Wilfred says he met the war. The war came in the form of a man with 3 faces. One to play music from a pipe made of bone, one to scream of death and pain, and the third needed to keep its mouth closed, because if it didn't, dirt and blood would come from it. It had multiple arms, some hands holding weaponry. Wilfred didn't get a good look at a lot of its skin, but the little that he could see was very scarred and injured. This entity is referred to as the Piper from now on, and you will figure out why in just a minute. Wilfred says that while he was meeting the war, it approached him, and he got the feeling that it was come to, take him, and Wilfred begged for his life. He said, "He's not ready, please don't take me." And the Piper, or the war to Wilfred, surprisingly agrees, giving him a pen, and leaving. And Wilfred knew, he got this feeling that it would be coming back for him pretty soon. And he was correct! Wilfred's not doing fantastic, and he is actually sent back to England for a little bit, if I am not mistaken. But he comes back. Before he came back, though, Clarence notices that there are a lot of men that look as if they're hearing something and go, just disappear, never come back once they go to this hill that Wilfred was on. Clarence begins calling this process paying the Piper, obviously a reference to the Pied Piper story. As I said, Wilfred comes back, and when he gets back, Clarence notices a huge difference in him. He seems more energetic, more prepared to go to war, almost. And his poetry, he's still making the poetry, and it's gotten better in Clarence's opinion. There's more heart in it, it's just, Clarence thinks it's better. So, he's not a hater anymore. Wilfred is obviously still hearing some form of music every once in a while, and at this point he asks Clarence if he hears it too, and he says, "No, I don't know what you're talking about." So a little while after Wilfred gets back, in the middle of the night, Clarence wakes up to Wilfred sitting with him, and he says, "It's almost coming," or "The day's almost here, it's almost over," and Wilfred was shot in battle a few days later and died. I hate that I'm probably going to have to censor some of this. Clarence does point out that when Wilfred's passing occurred, that was the turning point where he believes that peace started to win, when the war started to end. And that's the story of Wilfred Owen. I would like to point out that Wilfred Owen was a real guy who was a real soldier and did actually write poetry. So after this statement, John takes a minute to shit on just all over Gertrude's organization skills for this archive. He's like, whoa, okay, I was getting statements from the mid-2010s, and now this is from the early 1900s. What's going on? Doesn't really know what to do about it. He's very frustrated, but he does say he thinks that the name Rayner sounds familiar to him. Does it? Does that mean anything? We'll see. So, we're almost done here. We're almost done. Real quick, let's do a fast recap of everything that we have learned up until this point. I think that would be beneficial. I would try to be as quick as possible, and I actually mean quick this time. So, what do we know about this show already? The main topic of this show is the Magnus Institute. The Magnus Institute is a school in London, England, that focuses on researching the paranormal and esoteric and unexplainable. This school has a large amount of weird books and weird literature, and also accepts submissions from the public of their unexplained experiences, usually a little traumatic. All of these pieces of information need to be archived, and the previous archivist, a lady named Gertrude Robinson, is no longer with us and supposedly was not good at archiving these statements. She has been replaced by Jonathan Sims. He's a little frustrated with Gertrude's organization system, and he is clearly skeptical of the majority of these statements. He's attempting to reorganize these statements and digitize a lot of them. However, many of them are not recording on his laptop on modern technology. These statements that cannot be digitized modernly are being recorded on old-fashioned tape recorders, which is the form that the podcast takes. That's what we're listening to, is these tape recordings. These statements are typically traumatic experiences, unexplainable, paranormal, weird stuff, and as the show goes on, we will start to notice that a lot of these stories have something in common. Not only occasionally the people that are involved, we start to notice that different statement givers have very similar experiences, and it seems to almost be the same thing that is haunting them. There are other staff members that work at the Magnus Institute, specifically in the archive. Sasha James, Tim Stoker, and Martin Blackwood. I think John also mentions the name of the head of the Institute, Mr. Elias Bouchard. I think he mentions that episode 1, but we haven't, really met any of these people quite yet. But we will, so don't worry. At the end of each statement reading, John tells us a little bit about what information he and his team of researchers have discovered in doing their job, and we get a little bit of John's opinions. Okay, everyone on the same page? Okay, cool. Okay, almost done. Now to episode 8. We meet Ivo Lensick, and he tells us a little bit about himself. He inherited a construction career from his dad, and in 2006 he began working on a house on Hilltop Road. There he met the owner, a man named Raymond Fielding. He showed him the deed to the house to prove that he was the owner, and Ivo was like, cool, I'm gonna get to work. So as Ivo's kind of looking around, checking out the house, figuring out what needs to be done to it, he notices that Raymond keeps looking out the window, sort of staring at this gigantic tree that's outside. And Ivo noticed the tree. He was like, that's a huge tree, it's kind of scary. But whatever, he can be weird, he owns the house, he can do whatever he wants. He's continuing to, check out the house, to work on it, and then Raymond's just gone. He hears a noise and he's gone. Alright, that's very weird. And he starts smelling something, like something burning, like burnt hair. And where Raymond stood, there's a scorch mark, like a very obvious, burnt mark on the floor. And he touches it, but it's cold. And that's weird. And he doesn't feel well, he's freaking out. Ivo passes out. He's unconscious for a moment, so this is not going well. A little bit later, I think he wakes up, and then he's, freaking out. He's freaking out. We find out why, not just because, obviously. This weird happening in particular doesn't immediately strike him as paranormal. He gets very, very, very nervous because his dad, and his dad's side of the family in general, had a very strong history of schizophrenia. He actually remembers growing up and watching his dad be in a study drawing fractals and talking about how something's gonna come get him one day. It's gonna come get him, and how telling Ivo, his son, that he'll know him because he'll see the bones in his hands. His dad ended up taking his own life. They didn't really, but the thing is, they never really figured out how he did it. The tools were never there, and the only thing they really found with his body is a very obvious look of just pure horror. And that's not good. Ivo wakes up in the hospital, and luckily, after a few tests, the nurses tell him, it's not schizophrenia, you're not schizophrenic. And he's like, oh, phew, I guess, that he doesn't explain what's going on. And he kind of vents to the nurse. The nurse, her name is Anna. He kind of just tells her everything about his job, what he's been doing, how weird it is, and his experience. So he's kind of trauma dumping to this nurse Anna. She seems to know something about the house on Hilltop Road. Notably, in the 60s, it was apparently used as a halfway house for runaway teenagers and troubled kids with mental health issues. And it was reportedly run by Raymond Fielding. At some point, a girl named Agnes showed up. She was about like 11, and she was weird. That's a reoccurring factor with these characters. Eventually, over time, the other kids, the other teenagers that were staying there just moved on, as Raymond said, and it was just him and Agnes. A lot of people actually rumored that she was his actual child. And then one day, Raymond disappeared. Also, so did various pets and animals throughout the neighborhood. Eventually, a 5-year-old boy went missing in the area. Some people thought that it was Spooky Agnes that did it, and eventually, in the, I think it was the mid-70s, the house reportedly burnt down. There were human remains inside, but they were not of Agnes, only Raymond, but he was missing a hand. So, back to Ivo, he goes back to work after a few days, and he doesn't like this place. It's weird and spooky. He doesn't like the house on Hilltop Road. He starts leaving before it's really dark because he doesn't want to be there when it's dark. It's spooky. One day he gets too focused on his work and he's there while it's dark. He stayed too late, and as he has this sort of realization, he gets really anxious and suddenly feels this heat emanating from him, like the inside of him. He says it feels like his bones are on fire. He's sort of stuck there for a minute feeling that until there's a knock at the door. Guess who it is? No, it's actually not Raymond Fielding. It is a priest. Oh, something I forgot to mention. Anna said that the halfway house was very, like, Catholic. It was affiliated with the Catholic Church. I think that's how she knew about it. I think she was affiliated with the Catholic Church. That being said, she apparently talked to this priest, Father Edwin Burrows, and he's like, hey, I'm gonna do this. He's like, hey, I know Nurse Anna. I think he calls her Annie, but he's like, hey, she said you got a situation going on here, and I'm going to perform an exorcism if that's okay with you. And Ivo's like, okay, I'm gonna leave the house while you do that, but, like, you know, go ahead, whatever. I totally just had a very bad experience just now. So he's really overwhelmed. Ivo goes outside, lets the priest do his business inside, and while he's outside, he is kind of looking around the garden and is met with this gigantic spooky tree, and he is really going through it. He's understandably, and he kind of has a moment where he is overcome with anger and rage, and he just beats the crap out of the tree. I think he actually has a crowbar. I think he finds like a crowbar and he beats the crap out of the tree, and it starts to bleed. He thinks, like, is that sap or something? No, it's blood. This, like, makes him, like, worse. Like, he feels worse now. He feels more angry. Let me just chain it to my car and drive and see if I can uproot the whole thing for some reason. So he's like, I'm gonna do that, and he does that, and the tree uproots, you know? I want this tree gone. I don't want it. I get this tree out. I hate this tree. F this tree. So, tree successfully uprooted. And inside of, like, the whole crater that the tree is left, tree that also has, like, scorch marks and burn marks all over it, like, just like the spot on the floor where Raymond was, inside of this tree hole, there is a box. Weird little wooden box with a bunch of weird patterns in the middle of it. He opens it up, and inside is a perfectly, I think it's a green apple. It's a perfectly fresh green apple. And for some reason, he touches it, and it immediately rots and turns into a bunch of little spiders. Drops it, he throws the box away. He's really, really, really uncomfortable by this. And the priest comes out, Father Edwin. He's just like, I keep doing this for the priest. He's like, I did all I can. Good luck. Bye. I think he finishes up everything, like, within a little bit. I think that he comes back again and continues to, you know, get the devil out of the house. I don't think anything else happens to Ivo. I think he finishes up the job and then leaves. That's the end of Ivo's construction experience at the house on Hilltop Road. The statement's over, and let's use pattern recognition and figure out what maybe might be John's opinion on this. It's bullshit. It's what he thinks, because Ivo mentioned his father has a history of schizophrenia. So he's like, well, obviously he's got schizophrenia. So Martin, we haven't got a lot about archival staff member Martin. He was able to confirm that Raymond Fielding sort of gained ownership of the house on Hilltop Road when his dad passed in 1957. That checks out with the story. Anna's story was verified by Tim, and Raymond did die in a house fire, and his obituary and memorials credited him to have worked with troubled youth. So that all checks out. So John doesn't have a lot to add himself to this statement. There's not, like, other than, like, you know, it's obviously bullshit and he was schizophrenic, he doesn't have a lot to, you know, nitpick about this. A lot of the aspects of the case have been confirmed true, aside from all of the weird business with the weird stuff and the apple and the guy disappearing and then all of that. However, may or may not be related. The same day the tree would have been uprooted, a woman named Agnes Montague was found deceased in her apartment, apparently at her own hand. So we have the Agneses. This could be the same Agnes. What's really particularly strange about it, though, is that there was a human hand, like a severed human hand, attached to her wrist. It is related. So we are almost done with this really rough monstrosity of a first video. If you're still here, I really appreciate you. Let's go to the next one. Oh my god, you guys. This statement is by Julia Montauk, a woman who is giving us her story about her experience with her father. This episode's gonna be very hard to talk about and keep it YouTube friendly. Her father is Robert Montauk, and he is a serial killer. He took the lives of over 40 people and passed away in jail. Julia's gonna tell us a little bit about her upbringing, with that being her life. She has a memory of going downstairs when she was about 7. She heard a noise, and she sees her mother's pendant on the table, you know, without her mother there. Her mom's pendant is very specific to her. It had like an eyeball and a hand on it, so very specific pendant. She's like, this is weird, I'm gonna go get my dad. So she goes and she wakes up her dad, Robert, who is immediately concerned, as one would be when finding their wife is missing. He goes downstairs, he sees the pendant, he's like, oh no. He turns on the water, like the faucet, and the water is gross. It's nasty, it's like not the color it should be, and Robert is very concerned. When Robert sees the water, he like seems to know something, and sends his daughter to bed, and leaves. The next morning, he is drinking, and when he finally comes to talk to Julia, he tells her that her mother is gone. Again, he's drinking, he starts drinking a lot, and spending a lot of time in his shed in the backyard, which Julia points out always kind of smells like meat. Oh, it's also worth noting that Robert Montauk is a police officer at this time, and we don't find out until like a little bit later, but he did not make a report about his wife. Sus, okay. So her dad, Robert, he continuously is getting injured and bleeding a lot, to the point where Julia, she's still like growing up, she's learning very quickly how to effectively clean blood out of carpets. Especially one time where I think it's like she wasn't asleep and she was like pretending to be asleep, but he's covered in gook and blood, and he's kind of like watching her in her room while she's like sleeping, and he's just like, it's not weird. He's just, well, it's weird. There's blood on him, but it's not weird. He's just like talking about how like he'll do anything to protect her and how he loves her so much, and he's, you know, this is a difficult moment. So Julia's like 10, I think she was. I think like 10 when she picks up a call meant for her dad, somebody named Detective Rayner. Again, wants to talk to her dad, and when she gives the phone over to Robert, he's like talking to him, and he's like, no, I don't wanna do that. You do it. And then after like a little bit, he's just like, okay, I'll do it ASAP, and then hangs up. And then he is gone, and then spends the rest of the night in the shed. That's weird. What's weirder though, they had like a guest room. I think it was a guest room, and Julia's dad, Robert, turned it into a dark room for like photos and stuff. And at one point, she's in there and she's looking around, and she sees a bunch of pictures, like weirdly obscured, like dark pictures of people's faces with like symbols drawn on them. I think that when she asks her dad about it, he just like gives her a hug and is like, bye, and leaves. No further explanation on that for you, child. You don't. So a while later, Julia wakes up at like 2 in the morning and goes downstairs to get some water, and when she turns on the faucet, the water is that same icky, disgusting, nasty color. She hears a noise at the door, which isn't really described as like a knocking. It's repeated, but it's almost like a wet, meaty sound, and this obviously frightens young Julia, and she freaks out and calls the police. Eventually, whatever is slamming into the door is successful and breaks down the door, so she leaves through like the back door or something. She goes to the shed that's out there, because that's like, you know, another place of shelter, and maybe her dad's in there, you know, maybe. He totally is in there. There's like a funky blue light coming from him while he's over there like standing over a body with like a heart in his hand. He like stabs it. He's like chanting when he does it, and there's jars of multiple other hearts around it. It's a weird scene. He stabs it, and then like everything stops. The light goes out, and Robert notices Julia's there, and he apologizes to her. She also notices that the person that is likely not with us anymore, that is laying in front of him, that he was doing this ritual with, is wearing a pendant that looks just like her mom's pendant. After this, Robert was arrested because Julia called the police, and that is where Julia's story comes to an end. There's a lot to fact check about this. Robert Montauk was a real serial killer who was charged with multiple cases of murder. I don't know what I can and cannot say anymore. After some research, the archival staff discovered that the pendant, with how it was described, is likely affiliated with an organization called the People's Church of the Divine Host, which was founded by a minister named Maxwell Rayner. Where have we heard Rayner before? This is where the book becomes helpful, and this is where I realized, yeah, I did not make a mistake by writing this down. Supposedly, in 1994, this Maxwell Rayner disappeared. The body that was in the shed with Robert when he was doing that thing that Julia found, that got him eventually arrested, the body that was there, that was being used in it, was Christopher Lorne, who was a member of the People's Church of the Divine Host. Things are connecting. So, I mentioned earlier in the beginning of the statement that Robert Montauk died in prison. That's true. He did. He was stabbed 47 times, but nobody could have gone inside of his cell. It was a locked cell. It was just him in pitch black darkness. One more. Trevor Herbert, who here is referred to as the Tramp, a tramp. If you are unfamiliar, that's a word for like a vagrant, someone who is homeless, who doesn't have a particular residency, and is traveling while like looking for work or experiences. That's what Trevor is. He had a very difficult upbringing. His mother passed at the hand of their father, who then later took his own life. Did he take his own life, or was it? Or he just like drank himself to death. Trevor and his brother Nigel had a very difficult time. They went into the foster system, but their foster families usually separated them, and they did not want that, so they kept running away until eventually they just stayed on the streets together. In 1959, Trevor and his brother were approached by a woman named Sylvia McDonald, who felt very bad for them and, wanted to give them somewhere to stay for a little bit. This is a good time to address what Trevor describes as vampires. They are animalistic, non-human creatures who don't talk because there's like a giant vampire tongue in their throats. They don't talk, and they communicate telepathically, Trevor says. And Sylvia was one of these monsters, one of these creatures. She took them to her house, which was very, unlived in, as he described it. It felt like she had like a ritualistic path that she walked through as to not disturb the rest of the house. They thought she was weird, especially when she tried to bring them into 2 separate rooms. They didn't like that. So, historically they don't like that. So, despite the fact that it's like awfully cold outside, they decide they're gonna leave. They start to go, but Sylvia, blocks them in. Trevor hides, and she attacks Nigel. It is graphically described. I'm not going to, but it's nasty. he then attacks her and stabs her, and I think he lights her with like the flame from a candle, and then watches her like burn up. So he leaves, and a decade goes by. He still hasn't really processed this. Trevor actually thinks that this was some form of coping mechanism that his brain came up with for him to replace the traumatic imagery or the memory of someone likely just attacking his brother. Until he's on the street, you know, like begging for cash, and I think a couple gives him some money, but when he sees this couple, vampire, and he turned out to be right. He watched this couple, he followed them, he watched this guy, this freaky guy, take this woman, who he presumed was his girlfriend, into a house, and then super duper bite her and attack her, like the tongue thingy, and you know, he goes to attack this thing, and it bites him. Now, he has neglected to mention that he has taken part in many a substance, and he currently had, during that time, an issue with H, and it affected his blood to the point where the vampire, like, went, bleh, no, I don't like that, and, like, gagged and spit it up and was like, ah, that's nasty. While this is happening, the lady takes this as an opportunity to attack the vampire guy, and while she's doing that, he gets a wooden stake, and he takes out that vampire. And they burn it. You have to burn it. You can't forget to burn it. That's important. He goes on to do this multiple times with other vampires, and at one point, one of them that he did this to wasn't actually a vampire. He was wrong, but he was a criminal. So he, like, justified it to himself. After the statement's taken, apparently, and John explains this, that Martin got this information. Bear with me. Martin said that apparently, after giving this statement, Trevor went into the break room to rest and did not wake up. His lung cancer supposedly got him in that moment. Also, he brought a bag of vampire tea to the statement, but they're not in archive storage. And I think John's like looking at like a picture of them, but they look like shark teeth. They're apparently vampire teeth. So that's episode 10. That's the first 10 episodes of the Magnus Archives. Like, my book as a diagram. And you know what's great? What's crazy is we still have this much more to go. I'm trying to think of what we know thus far that I didn't cover on my earlier recap. Genuinely, I did not expect so many people to care about the silly little project that I put together for a show that I was very, very impressed by. I have a difficult time remembering certain stuff sometimes, and the note-taking has always just been my way that I take in media. I've done that with various books that I've liked over the years and other stuff. It's just what helps me, and I got a lot of responses from people on TikTok saying that it helps them and that they would love a more in-depth breakdown of it. I don't know if this is what that is. If you're here, then you finished it, and I really appreciate that. I cannot express how much I appreciate that. So this is sort of an interest test. If you think that this is cool, and you also enjoyed my summaries of the episodes, I absolutely need to go through them more briefly and be quicker next time. It took a very long time and many dumps of my camera roll to complete this. So if I'm gonna get to 200 episodes and then maybe do protocol afterwards, if you would like to see more, let me know. I hope that you have an amazing day, and maybe I'll see you in the next one. Bye! I started out really not confident with myself in the beginning, so I wrote in pencil, and then right like around here I started mainly using pen, and I feel like it looks so much better. And then I started using like sticky notes and stuff. Hey, are you paying attention?